Hi guys, welcome to Elizabeth Ann Reads. I'm Anne. Today I want to talk about the middle grade books that I read in March. So March was Middle Grade March, hosted by some lovely ladies that I will leave linked down below, just in case you missed it. So I read a few other things in March, but primarily middle grade, and middle grade's all I'm going to talk about today, because I read some really fantastic books and I want to tell you about them. I've been struggling this year to find kind of my reading groove. I haven't been coming across anything that I absolutely loved, but that all changed in March. I read 9 middle grade books. 3 of them were 5 stars. 2 of them were like borderline between 4 and 5, and 2 of them were 4 stars. So all in all, that's pretty fantastic. So yeah, I'm going to tell you about them. I'm going to go in order from least favorite to favorite. And yeah, let's just get into it. The book I'm going to start with, or my lowest rated, was Rump by Liesl Shurtleff. This, unfortunately, is a pretty popular book. It's not unfortunate that it's popular. I did not feel that way about it. I know it's pretty well loved, and it didn't work for me. This is a retelling of the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin, which is a story that I love, and I really liked the ideas that she worked with. I didn't really enjoy what she did with the story, and I just found it really dragging in the middle. So it wasn't a bad book. It was just kind of meh. It sits at like a 3, 2.5, maybe 3 star. And yeah, I just didn't care. And I am not inclined to continue on with it. I know there's other books in the series or companion novels, which I'm not inclined to continue on with. Again, I know this is a really well-loved book, so a lot of people would disagree with my opinion, and that's great. You should probably still pick it up and read it. But for me, it was just meh. It was just middle of the road. Next up was The Mysterious Disappearance of Aiden S., as told to his brother by David Levithan. This is a new release. We follow Aiden, who is he's 11, I think, and he disappears for a week. He is gone. His family, everyone's looking for him. They kind of get to the point where they assume he's dead, and then he reappears and claims he's been in another world, like a fantasy world. And so this isn't so much dealing with the fantasy. This is dealing with the aftermath of, returning home when you've experienced something kind of otherworldly, and how he's treated. Of course, the adults don't believe him, but how he's treated, how he kind of reacclimates to normal life. And it's just a very thoughtful, kind of hard-hitting book. It's not, I don't see it having a big appeal for most middle graders. There's probably some that would really enjoy it, but it's just kind of a slow-moving, thoughtful book. I really enjoyed this book. It would have been a 4 star for me, except towards the end, it tossed in a couple what I would consider kind of adult topics, in a way that I didn't like. I felt like it tossed in a couple things. We're going to use the phrase token wokeness. I feel like it tossed in a couple things just to say they were in there. They had no bearing on the story, or very little. In one case, had absolutely no bearing on the story. One case had a little bit. But they're topics that I feel like either they can't just be glossed over. They either have to not be there, or they have to be addressed in depth. And so that really bothered me. I felt like there were things that needed to be talked about that weren't. And so, that pulled it down for me. But I liked the idea of this book. I liked the characters and just the way the parents are trying to relate, but they don't really believe what their son's saying. And his brother is more prone to believe him, but is still struggling with the concept of this other world. I thought it was really interesting and a good story, and I enjoyed it. But those few things just dragged it down a little bit for me. Next up is Miracle on Maple Hill by Virginia Sorensen. This is an older children's book. I think it was published in the early 50s. And a lot of people were reading this one this month. This follows a family who the father has come home from the war. He is suffering some PTSD, and they decide to move out of town into the country for a variety of reasons. And it's just kind of their story of, going from one life to another. And it's just a very kind of quiet, calm novel. I just loved the kind of the environment of it. And it was exactly what I wanted at the time. It was just cozy and sweet. And again, not a huge, like, overarching, exciting plot, but just kind of slice of life, like family life and neighbors and how life differs in the country from in the city. And yeah, it was really sweet, and I would recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. Then I want to talk about The Elephant in the Room by Holly Goldberg Sloan. This is another new release. This probably wins for prettiest cover, although I've got some really pretty covers in this deck. But this probably wins. We have an elephant on the cover. There's flamingos on the back cover. And underneath the hardback is this hot pink. It's beautiful. I love it. In this we follow a girl, Scylla, who is of Turkish descent. She lives in the U.S. in Oregon, actually, with her parents. Her mother ends up having to leave to go back to Turkey for a variety of reasons. And so she and her father are struggling with that. Everyone's struggling with that. It's just, circumstances. Her father's a mechanic, and they end up meeting this man who lives out in the country, and kind of befriending him, and they end up adopting this elephant from a circus that's retiring or going out of business. And Scylla has an affinity for elephants, and so this man that lives out in the country on this estate ends up kind of adopting this elephant, buying it off the circus master, and it's their story. Scylla and her friend, whose name I can't remember, Matteo, a friend from school, they end up kind of spending their summer helping this man with the chores around the house and taking care of the elephant, or chores around the property, taking care of the elephant. It's just a very sweet story of friendship and family and just community and big dreams coming true, and how we can help in both little ways and big ways the people around us. And it was sweet. I really enjoyed it. I also love, because it's set in Oregon, it's set literally almost right where I live, a tiny bit south of where I live, but within a few miles of where I live, which is fun. You don't come across that a lot. And so that was really fun to read about different areas or different landmarks and to know exactly what they're talking about and where it is. That's always a bonus for me in a book. But I really, really enjoyed this book. That was 4 stars. Then I have The Prophet Calls by Melanie Sumrow. This is a book about a cult, a polygamist cult. So we follow Gentry and her family. Gentry is 12, almost 13, and her family belongs to a very kind of extremist polygamist cult. And she's been raised there. This is the life she's always known. But then some questions start coming up. Rules keep changing. The prophet keeps saying different things or changing expectations, and she doesn't always like it. She doesn't always like what's expected of her or the way things change. And so it's this constant struggle between, I don't like this, but I'm fearful of not being one of the chosen. And just kind of this struggle constantly back and forth between what's expected of her and what she feels and thinks and what she's scared of. And I just thought it was really, really, really interesting. This was a 4.5, verging on 5 for me. The one thing that I didn't like about it was the ending. I liked the ending fine, but I always want to see more. I kind of want to see the aftermath of the story, and we didn't really get that in this book. It was a little too abrupt, and I wanted to know more about the after effects. But I thought this was really good and would recommend it. Again, I think I would be cautious about handing this to some middle schoolers, just because of some of the subject matter and, kind of adult themes. But I found it super, super interesting. Then we have The Bird, the Boy, and the Coffin Maker. No, sorry. The Boy, the Bird, and the Coffin Maker by Matilda Woods. Oh, you can't even see that. There we go. This was a cover buy for me. I saw it on Book Outlet and picked it up just because it was pretty. The inside's pretty too. The print is all in blue, which I like. It has some little illustrations on pages. This is kind of a fairy tale allegory. It's very fantastical, but not like a traditional fairy tale. We follow a man, the coffin maker, and this boy who kind of comes into his life. We just see this friendship develop between this coffin maker and this young boy, and kind of their story, and it's really unique. Like, it's really different than anything I've read before. I don't quite know what to compare it to. I guess I would maybe put it more in the... No, I wouldn't even say magical realism, because there's really not a whole lot of realism to it. It's just very kind of fantastical, but in a very kind of understated way, I guess. and it's super short, super quick read. But again, just a very thoughtful. I've read lots of thoughtful books this month, and I really, really liked this. Warning though, it did make me a little weepy just in the first chapter, so, be aware of that going into it. All right, 3 more books, and these were all 5 stars for me. The first I want to talk about is The Strangers by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is the first in a trilogy. We follow 3 siblings, Chess, Emma, and Finn, and they come home from school one day and find their mother watching the news or reading the news about the disappearance of 3 kids with their same names and same birthdays. These kids have disappeared. And then their mom ends up leaving, takes a trip, and so they're left in the care of someone else. And just kind of the mysteries compound. They build on each other. And, so we're kind of with them trying to solve this mystery and figure out what's going on, and they're kind of being kept in the dark. But then things start to happen. I've heard really mixed things about this book. Some people really love it. Some people kind of struggle with some of the twists. I don't want to be spoilery, but there's kind of a big twist that happens in the middle, and some people don't like that, which I totally understand. For me, it's a twist that I love, and it's kind of a twist that I always secretly hope for in books, and I rarely get. So I loved this book. I thought it was exciting. It's pretty chunky, but I read through it super fast. I wanted to know what was happening, wanted to know what would happen next. I really, really liked this book. It absolutely 100% worked for me. I've already ordered the 2nd and 3rd books in the series that I'm going to pick up very, very soon, hopefully. All right. Second to last, this is the first book I picked up in the month, and this was The Extremely Inconvenient Adventures of Bronte Meddlestone by Jacqueline Moriarty. Side note, Jacqueline Moriarty is the sister of Leanne Moriarty of Big Little Lies fame. But this is a fantasy story in which we follow Bronte. Her parents are dead. She's been raised by an aunt, and then she finds out her parents are dead, and they send her on this quest kind of journey to deliver gifts to each of her aunts. She has 10 aunts, and there's a very specific kind of set of rules she has to follow, and very specific timeline she has to follow to get to all these places and deliver these things to all these aunts. And so you just follow her on these adventures. I thought this was super unique. It feels very different than other middle grade fantasy I've read. It's creative. It's pretty funny. And I think Jacqueline Moriarty does a really, really good job of putting in things in the story early on that come back much, much later. So all these things that tie together in the end are planted throughout the story, which, that's fantastic when an author does that, but I don't see it real often, or at least well done in middle grade. And so I was just really impressed with kind of the way the whole story is thought out and the way every little thing kind of ties together. And I would definitely recommend picking this up. It was a little bit of a slower read, not in a bad way. It felt dense. There was a lot in there. But I would definitely recommend also another really beautiful cover. I just really like the colors in there. But again, would highly, highly recommend this one. It was a lot of fun. And then the very last book I want to talk about, my favorite of the month, my favorite of the year so far, is A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus. Once again, gorgeous cover. This is historical fiction. We follow 3 children who, it's during World War II, they are sent out of London during the Blitz. They are sent to this little kind of hamlet, and like a lot of children during World War II, are set up with a family there, and this follows their story. They go through a couple different families while they're there. Things just keep kind of not working out. But throughout their journey, they kind of, they're befriended by a local librarian. So not only is it a beautiful little historical fiction story of these 3 kids, but there's also a strong love of books in this book. I will say, I don't think this book does anything particularly original or unique, but while I was reading this book, it was so comforting. Like, it just felt so familiar and warm and exactly what I wanted it to be. It was like the feeling of going and rereading a favorite book, and everything's just cozy and perfect, and you just want to cuddle up and read forever. That's what this felt like, but that on a first read through, like not a reread, on a first time through, it felt so comfortable and familiar, and I love that. It's rare that I read a book that I get that feeling from the first time I read it. And I thought it was just a really beautiful little book, and I loved this book. I love this book and would highly recommend, highly, highly, highly recommend that you pick this up and read it. So yeah, so that's it. My 9 middle grade books. I hope you pick up some of these. Most of them were just fantastic reads, and I would recommend pretty much all of them. But that is it for today. Be sure and let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these, or if not, what was your favorite book that you read in March? I would love to have more middle grade to add to my stack. I still have a huge stack of middle grade that I didn't get to that I'm going to keep working my way through. But yeah, tell me what your favorite read of middle grade March was. And thank you for watching.